Welcome back to the business edition of PM Express, and we are tracking the process, payment of depositors. And I believe that you've gotten some education about where we've gotten so far, but one critical question that at one point we've gotten to is about this whole idea about scale of preference. Why are institutions getting preference over retail investors? Mr. Nipa, I mean, I have about maybe 70,000 there. I need to take care of my granny, my kids' school fees, and all the rest. What went into my understanding here about this whole scale of preference where schools, churches are being given priority over a George Afe who badly needs money?
Well, George, I think I need to correct an impression here or a statement. In terms of the corporates, we are not particularly favoring any particular class of corporates. I give you an example. In the distribution of the billion cedis, banks and insurance companies are getting zero cash. All right, they are going.
So you're doing more of the bonds to these institutions.
Yes, we are doing more of the bonds to these institutions because the assumption is that, in terms of liquidity, they must be fairly robust. And second, what is also going to be of concern to them would be the quality of the assets. All right, and therefore, if you have a bond guaranteed by a government, there isn't going to be any impairment in your books, and so the bond is fine with you. Okay, so that is one. Coming back to the individuals, we do not think that they have been marginalized in any way, shape, or form, because at the new amount of 70,000 cedis cash, all right, 98.1% of that class alone of individuals would be fully sorted out 100% cash, and therefore it is a very good thing. The 1.9% of something are those that are being given bonds, and they are not only being given bonds because they would have gotten cash up to 70,000. So given what I have been given, I mean, in terms of funding and the other interest and all, I think is a good thing. One thing I need to mention is you take the savings and loans, you take the microfinance institutions, rural banks that continue to exist. They have such severe liquidity constraints, okay, that if their situation isn't addressed, there will be a domino effect. What will happen is that there will be a cascading effect, and they will also start going down. And mind you, they also have depositors who have invested in them. So all in all, it isn't one of discriminating against the individual.
So in terms of ratios here, if I get you right, more of these corporate institutions might be getting the bonds rather than cash.
Precisely. If you take, depending upon which type of corporate you fall in, if you take a bank for one, you will get a bond 100%. You will get no cash. Insurance companies, you get 100% bond, and you didn't have any cash. If you take the Securities and Exchange Commission SEC entities, they have an exposure of about 1.2 billion cedis. They are only going to get a cash application of 100 million cedis. All right. If you take the rural banks, the savings and loans companies, okay, and the microfinance institutions still in operation, where they are very vulnerable, okay, they are not going to get all cash. They're also going to have a mix of bonds and cash.
Let's get back to one thing that I think is really of interest to me about the bonds. I understand they are zero rated. 5 years.
Well, George, I shed more light by setting out the features of the bond. It is no interest. It is a no interest coupon, that is right. It is for 5 years. Okay, but it does not mean that you have to wait for 5 years. No. There are drawdowns, all right? And the first drawdown commences in March 2021. What it is that the bond is split into 10 tranches, all right? So March 2021 will be the first drawdown. 6 months after the second drawdown, 6 months after the third drawdown, and so on and so forth. So that is the drawdown. Okay, you don't have to wait for 5 years. If you are cash strapped and you want liquidity, then what you can do after the first drawdown is you can approach CBD and CBG, and then they can discount for you. But of course, that is a bank-customer relationship matter. So there is scope for some liquidity there.
But some would say there's zero-rated bond. Who is going to take that bond up? No bank will take it up.
Well, Bank of Ghana, CBG is a custodian, and I believe they'll be happy to engage with you on that.
Take
yes,
it for
I
you.
believe that.
But some say that I feel cheated here. This is a zero-rated bond spread over 5 years. I could be making some millions from that money if I present value now.
Well, you could be making nothing on the other hand, because this is, I did mention, it's largely an assetless receivership. There's hardly anything over there. And therefore, typically, if we had to make payments out of the assets of the company, it will be so low, it will be so poor, all right, and it will take time. And you did mention, and I did say that one of the areas we are looking to recover is through a forensics asset tracing exercise. And that can take years. And of course, I can only pay, and we use the term, of course, loosely, dividends to creditors. I can only pay as and when I have realized. And it will depend upon the quantum and the timing of realizations. And that could take 2-3 years. And of course, I wouldn't give you interest when I pay. I give you your sum as at the date of receivership. Okay. And mind you, let's put this in context as well, that we are dealing with institutions that, of course, were giving phenomenal interest rates. We do know them. They were averaging 35%, 45%, 40%, and all at a time that the T-bill rates were averaging 15%. I didn't go when I was appointed, right? I didn't go and strip interest. I am paying principal and interest, however very high it may be, as at the dates of revocation.
As we try and wrap this discussion up, because time is not our best friend right now. Again, quickly, what went into the decision to also create account at CBG? I don't need an account. Let me have my money.
Well, CBG has played a very crucial role in terms of the delivery of my work, and therefore it's a symbiotic partnership. You know, so they have been helpful, they have been very flexible, they have been very accommodating. So I think that I do appreciate what they've done, and it's good.
I don't need an account, I need my money?
Well, you may need your money, but you also need to go through some processes. I would very much want to track what you take out and what is retained and all of them. In the past, we were using Momo payments and we had a bit of a problem with that. But if it has to go through CBG and an account has to be opened, I think for good tracking and all is good.
Interesting. Were you trying to help government also in managing liquidity as well in the system?
Well, I'm only a receiver. Mine is to secure and to make realizations and to make distributions. I don't speak to that.
Mr. Nipa, as you wrap up on this discussion, one would ask that, how has it been? Sleepless nights? I see you online, very odd hours. Do you really catch a sleep or rest?
Well, I do catch a sleep every now and then. I do rest, but I could do with some more. It is a very stressful exercise, but then it's an occupational hazard, and I see myself as a soldier, and I've been doing this all my life, all my working life. So yes, it is very stressful. Even your personal safety is an issue, but then you have to do your work.
Any lessons for you that, what has been the revelations for you? So you've done this work, so you know how something, you are not surprised, but have you uncovered something that has made you surprised or you're worried by it?
I have uncovered a lot of things, a lot of findings, George, but I'm very slow to speak at this stage. Timing is the issue, because at this point, people are hurting and hurting very badly, and all they want is their money. So for you to talk about lessons learned at this point wraps people the wrong way. There's a lot I've learned, so indulge me at the appropriate time. I think we can talk about
your final words to the depositors out there, for those who are worried and still information trickling in. What is your final words to these depositors out there who are waiting for their monies and the assurance from you that they will get everything?
Well, my final word to depositors whose claims have been validated and agreed is that they surely will get all their monies as determined and instructed by the president. Mm-hmm. We have made full provision for this. And within a month, not later than end of March, they will be fully paid, those whose claims have been validated. So I would ask for some restraints and they exercise some patience.
That's a promise from Mr. Eric Nipa of PricewaterhouseCoopers.
Indeed, with the strength and the power of PricewaterhouseCoopers.
Well, all too soon we have to draw the curtain down. Time wasn't our best friend, but I believe that we've been able to capture all the issues here on the business edition of PM Express, tracking the process. When we talked about tracking, we'll be back again with Nipa to find out in trying to wind down this whole process and maybe get some snippets into his book that I believe he'll be writing one day about this whole receivership process. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate so much for your time and have a good day.
Thank you so much, George. Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the business edition of PM Express. Last week, the president, in a State of the Nation address, actually announced that this week, the receiver for the defunct financial institution, that is Eric Nana Nipa, will actually commence another round of payment for all those who've had their funds locked up in these institutions. So today, on the business edition of PM Express, we are tracking the progress of these payments. What has been paid so far? Is everyone going to get his or her money? And how are the payments actually going to be done? But let's get a little bit of background to this whole issue. If you recall that the Bank of Ghana last year actually appointed a partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers, Eric Nana Nipa, to manage the process by winding down all these financial institutions that have had their licenses actually revoked. Now we got some understanding that these were actually savings and loans. You had the microfinance companies and also the microcredit companies. The Bank of Ghana, that was in May 31, revoked these licenses. We could talk about 347 microfinance companies that were actually lost their license. You have 39 microcredit institutions and 23 savings and loans and as well as finance houses. Now, on August 16, 2019, they appointed the receiver in terms of sending notice out to people that actually these are the institutions that would be affected in terms of them going out to actually close them down and get all their money. So these are some of the issues that we'll be discussing here. Now let's come back to the bit about devalidated claims in terms of getting some understanding. Now from the receiver, we understand that some 352,000 claims have been validated and will be paid, leaving the remainder of 800. As of Tuesday, more than 600 million Ghana cedis in cash have been actually advanced to the various accounts and these deposits. So these are some of the background issues that we're actually giving you with respect to this whole receivership process as we track the progress, getting more details on that with the partners, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and the receiver for this process. My name is George Joaf. We'll be right back after this commercial break as we engage the receiver, Eric Nana Nipa. Welcome back from the break, and it's on the table. We're looking at the receivership process. How has it gone in terms of how it started and where are we right now? And one critical thing, paying those deposits, validated and those that have not been validated. How are the process going so far? Mr. Eric Nipa is the receiver for this whole process. Mr. Nipa, thank you so much for joining us on the business edition of PM Express.
Thank you, George, for having me.
And we've met again, or we are talking about this thing again.
Well, we are a couple of months ago, I think about 10 months ago, we had our conversation. Yes, that's right.
Now, let's tell me, how's the process going so far in terms of this whole receivership process that we're talking about?
Well, the process is going on, hectic, but smooth and on point. Although generally people don't seem to appreciate that. But if we have to consider the journey so far, where we came from, we are 10 months down the line. We are looking at, for the purpose of my analysis, I am looking at 3 sets of insolvencies. All right. We are looking at the 347 microfinance institutions that were placed in receivership. We are looking at the savings and loans companies and finance houses, 23 of them, that were also placed in receivership. They come directly under my control as receiver. And then we have the third strand or set, which is the 39 microcredit institutions. That is under official liquidation with Mrs. Jemima Owari as the official liquidator. But then, of course, my firm PwC has a role to play there. Okay, so in terms of analysis, we look at it broadly within these 3.
So if I get you right, the microfinance institutions and then the savings and loans, they come directly under your purview, right?
Precisely.
And you are trying to explain to me which one falls under the Registrar General and the others. Just get some clarification on that one.
Well, we have 39 microcredit institutions or companies that were placed in liquidation. And those 39 come under Act 180, the Bodies Corporates Act. And those are in official liquidation. And the Registrar General, in the person of Mrs. Jemima Owari, she is the official liquidator for the purpose of the winding down of these 39 microcredit institutions.
Okay.
But how come I can speak to that is that my firm, PricewaterhouseCoopers, is the consultant to the official liquidator on this assignment.
So where have we gotten right now? I mean, there was always talk about regular updates to the market or to us, the public, and even all the interested parties. The last time we spoke, you were working on retrieving some of these assets, and you've paid some of them and not the rest. Where are you right now as we speak in terms of this whole receivership process in respect to the microfinance companies, the microcredit, and the savings and loans companies?
That's right. I mean, George, we've come quite far, over 10 months on average. I would respond to your question 3 ways.
Okay.
I would take the arena of depositors, depositor payments. That's one phase I'll speak to. I'll look at sale of assets as well, and then I'll look at the third aspect, which has to do with investigations and forensics. These 3 broadly define where we are coming from and where we are. So I'll speak to them in 3 categories, right? With regard to where we are coming from, as far as depositor payments are concerned, I need to mention actually that depositors form parts of the creditor base of the insolvency process. They are not the entirety of the creditor base, although that is what we hear, for good reason, because they are quite significant and dominant. Okay, so, but there are other segments of the creditor base. We have employees, we have trade creditors and others, you know. But for the purpose of where we are coming from, I'll limit it to depositors because that is where there's been a lot of action and traction.
About.
Yes, that's right. So for the 3 sets of insolvencies I've set out, I took control, including the microcredits, of a combined depositor base in terms of number of claims in the region of 360,000 number
for the microcredits.
For the microcredits, for the microfinance, and then for the savings and loans and finance houses. All 3 combined.
These are accounts?
These are accounts,
okay.
Claims that have been submitted.
Okay.
It's that's which I received by the deadline for the submission of claims dates. By the deadline for the submission of claim dates, I had received in the region of 360,000 of these claims. All right. Where we are now is that I have been able to not only validate, but I have been able to pay off about 320,000 of these claims out of the 360,000. So I am left with 40,000 to bring to closure. All right. So 300 and 320,000 of these claims have been fully settled. In 320,000 in number, I must say. 320,000 in number of these claims have been fully settled, fully paid out, 100% cash as we speak.
Let me get some clarity here. Let's sometimes we'll talk about volume and value here. What's the value of these claims? Are they about 10 billion, 70 billion, or what? In terms of these claims that came to your decks, let's do the valuation here.
Well, we can. The value of these claims is in excess of 1 billion cedis.
1 billion?
Yes, it's in excess of 1 billion cedis for the 320,000.
That is for the microcredits, microfinance.
Finance combined, yes.
Okay.
It's 300. It's in excess of 1 billion cedis.
Okay.
All right. So very well in terms of valuation, it's in terms of 1 billion cedis. But then, if you look at level of effort, level of activity, usually we speak to numbers because it reflects how much work we do. Okay. So in terms of numbers, where work done is concerned, in terms of numbers, we are looking, as I did mention, out of 360,000 claims in number. In terms of work we have done to date, we have validated and completely paid off 320,000 of these claims, worth in excess of 1 billion cedis.
Okay. So let's look at the others as well, the savings and loans. What about that one as well?
Well, all the 320,000 in number is made up of all three sets. I mean, what we are doing is, because of the commonality of actors, and sources of funding, where government funding is concerned, right? We have now brought them together, all right, and we speak to the figures as one. In our last interview, we were looking, you would recall, we were looking at microfinance. We spoke to microfinance, and then there was a savings and loans.
Yeah.
Okay, but where we are now is that because the source of funding in terms of payment is one, which is government of Ghana, to start with, and because the receiver is one, which is me, to get and by extension also assisting Mrs. Owari.
Yeah.
All right. The receiver stroke liquidator is one. Because of that, we group all of them as one and analyze accordingly.
Interesting. So I just also wanted to find out from you, in terms of these validated claims, there was these rumors going around that in terms of what was reported initially by these companies, after evaluation, it's way, way lower. You're talking about, so what the companies do, that we had these numbers on our books, post-validation, was it the same?
Well, it wasn't the same and isn't the same.
Was the variation that wide?
The 360,000, which is the total universe, the global figure that I've given to you, it's different from the amount we validated. We have validated 95%. So 95% are correct. Okay, 95% of them. So we have the 5% to go, which are highly doubtful and suspicious.
That's quite interesting, I must say.
Yes.
Let's come back to, so how much were you able to realize from the assets of these companies that it was difficult to pay the depositors for a government to come in there and support you before you realize everything?
That's right. George, I must say that asset realization, the whole asset realization arena has been a very challenging one for us.
Why?
Because it is largely an assetless insolvency process I'm dealing with. A lot of the assets have been diverted. The quality of the assets that remain are highly suspicious and quite
if I get you right, it means that initially these were the assets on the books. Did you go in too late so you couldn't realize these assets?
No, not necessarily. I think for us, we went in at the time that I was appointed.
Okay.
All right. I went in at the time that I was appointed, and it was on the back of an examination the regulator, the central bank, had conducted, and then concluding that these companies are insolvent, I was brought in. Okay, but the facts of the matter, George, and the overriding point is that a lot of the assets that were on the books are non-existent.
Why?
Well,
why are they not existent? So if you come to Georgia Afri Savings and Loans,
yes.
I talked about the fact that I have a branch in every regional capital. I have 20 pickup vehicles and all the rest. And these were captured in the handing over notes. Why is that when you went on ground, you can't find it? That's interesting.
Well, I think it's interesting when you look at the particular type of assets.
Okay.
If you take, for example, placements, all right.
Deposits.
Not only deposits, you can even investments.
Loans,
investments
okay.
for one. You take investments for one. Some of them reflected in their books that they had investments in other companies and other institutions. But then, of course, they are reflected in the books. But when you go in and you examine and you follow up, you would realize that those those investments are either non-existent or they've been encumbered to other third parties. And therefore, actually, if you have to ascertain the true value, it's not there. So these were some of the things. The other example I can give relates to the loan book. All right. Lots of them indicated that the quality of the loans were high. But indeed, when we went in there, a lot of them were non-existent. You couldn't even relate to them. Documentation supporting were so porous, you couldn't pursue anything. Okay, so very clearly there was a problem over there. And very clearly, from a prudent point, you say that there isn't anything. But I must say, George, we are not giving up. Okay, which brings me to the third thing we are doing. What we are doing is to bring in the law enforcement agencies. We are working very closely with the IOCO in a collaborative arrangement to pursue, to locate, and to trace and track down assets. And when we track down and we can take custody of them and realize them. So it's a very intensive exercise we are doing, and we are achieving some results.
Some would say that would be quite a long walk for you.
It is a long walk. That is how come it wasn't going to be possible for us to pay the depositors at this time, because it would have been, and it still is, a very long walk for us.
So, but don't you think that some will also say that could be an excuse for the receiver in the sense of their delays in realizing the assets then? Because if you say that you couldn't realize all the assets to pay depositors, maybe a little different approach could have gotten you the money.
Not necessarily that, because it isn't the receiver alone working in this instance. We have the full might and support of IOCO. All right. And what it is what it is. All right. We have been able to recover and retrieve some of the assets. And indeed, we have sold some of the assets, for example, motor vehicles. We have made some sales out of them. But for a bank type or an SDI, a specialized deposit institution, all right, which is the context of what you speak to, the bulk of assets, the quality of assets should be mainly in loans and then in investments. But they are just not there, all right? But if you talk of fixed assets like motor vehicles, at least there are some there which we have recovered and we have secured and we are selling.
Does it mean that if you had gotten in earlier, it wouldn't really make any difference, because these are falsified claims on the books of these institutions?
There's a possibility. It is possible, because if it's non-existent, I mean, timing of your moving in becomes quite irrelevant, because it's non-existent, and they were subject to creative accounting. That's what it is.
Interesting. So, having all these things as a challenge, what have you been able to realize as at the end of January from these disposing some of these assets in value terms? Well,
in value terms, what we have realized combined is in the region of 100. It's in the region of 100 million cedis. That is what we've been able to recover, about 100 million cedis, made up of some cash in bank that we were able to wrestle, and also some motor vehicles that we've been able to make sales, and some loan recoveries that we have.
And these are for the microcredit, microfinance, and the savings and loans. That's, some would say, peanuts.
It is actually, and that is reflective of the challenge I'm facing, that it is largely an assetless receivership, and something has to be done because people need to be made to take responsibility for that. It has regulatory implications. It even has implications where accounting bodies are concerned.
Interesting. In going into this exercise, so what was the valuation then? What was the amount that was valued, and compared to the 100 million that you've realized?
Well, we are still valuing. I think by the middle of March, we should be in the position to come out with the true value of all the companies. What we have done is to, through a competitive bidding process, select some valuers. And as we speak, they have started valuing all the companies.
But I thought that there was a handing over report for these institutions. So in going in, you knew that, okay, in terms of assets, you're looking at somewhere around 3 billion or 2 billion or something.
Well, I mean, the figures, when we went in, we conducted our own inventory.
Yeah.
And we asked we asked the operators of these companies to submit statement of accounts to us. And a lot of them didn't submit them. So what we are doing actually, which is also been something that has taken a lot of our energy, is to by ourselves bring in valuers to do their valuation. What we secure, okay, is what we value, okay, and then what we work with EOCO to recover is what we value, you know. But to say that they are handing over notes, there is a statement of accounts that was left, a handing over note. No. That wasn't the case. As far as the operators were concerned, lots of them have ceased preparing financial statements 2-3 years, you know, and even the very few statements that they presented were full of, I mean, you couldn't trust them.
You talked about something about accounting firm. I'll be taking a short break here very soon. I'll come back. But if you join us, this is the PM edition. If you just join us, this is the business edition of the PM Express as we look at the track and this whole receivership process and also paying these deposits that have been validated. How has it been so far? When is it going to complete the process? And what happens to those accounting firms and individuals that falsify all these accounts? We're getting more details and more answers with the receiver of this process, Mr. Eric Nipa. This is the business edition of PM Express. Welcome back to the business edition of PM Express, and we're looking at the receivership process. How has it gone so far? And paying those depositors, validated ones, of course. How the process been so far? What about those who are hearing that they actually falsified and massaged these assets and all those things and getting the fine details that we are all looking for? Mr. Eric Nipa is the receiver for this whole process, and how has it been for him so far? Thank you so much, sir, and we're back from the break. And we're talking about some of these accounting firms and even individuals that massage these numbers, and what is going to happen to them?
Well, George, I must say that the Institute of Chartered Accountants, ICA Ghana, has been very proactive. They have reached out to me and asked me for a statement on that. They have a very robust disciplinary process, and I'm confident that in my feedback to them, they would also take the necessary disciplinary processes and measures against them. So that is from the accountant
level.
Yeah, that's right. That's the perspective. But then again, at the level of the state investigators, of course, there is some criminality, I believe, attached to this. So this is something that, again, EOCO is looking at, and we are working with them to establish what is actually on the ground and to attest to every figure that we have found and compared to what these figures, compared to what these operators claimed that they had on their books. And on the strength of that, I think that with the disparity, the glaring disparity, criminal action will be taken, and of course, at the regulatory level, to some action will be taken.
So criminal action against the heads of these institutions, the SNLs, the MFIs, and the microcredit institutions, right?
Well, I would imagine, because there would be some collusion, some abetments,
Yeah.
you know, and these are serious issues, because it is a financial system. And if you massage and falsify figures to attract investments, then I believe there will be some criminality attached to this. And that may even explain how come unsuspecting depositors brought their funds there. Apart from the fact that maybe the yield or interest was very attractive, could be that the prospects and performance of some of these companies were very encouraging and enticing for people to continue to invest in them.
Interesting. Let's get, at what point did Mr. Nipa realize that, listen, we need to pay these depositors? What I've realized wasn't enough. I need some more from Bank of Ghana or Ministry of Finance for that request we made for those 5 billion Ghana cedis to be granted to you.
Thanks, George. I mean, it was always that big need from the onset. When I was appointed receiver in May, on the 31st of May, receiver for the 347 microfinance institutions. And I deployed my team throughout the country to secure and to preserve the assets of these companies, and also to secure the records of the books and records of these companies. We realized that actually there wasn't much there. Okay. And in securing the assets, we also had challenges from other third parties who claimed ownership over some of these assets. So very quickly we knew that there was a problem. Indeed, when we took over the cash tills and others, there was hardly any cash in some of these institutions. All right. As I speak to you, in terms of realizations, if you combine even from a cash perspective or money in the bank, for all three sets of insolvencies, what you've been able to recover is about half the amount of realization. This is 100 million.
Less than 50 million.
It's about less than 50 million, you know, for all this number of institutions. So very, very, very clearly and very quickly, and as part of the rollout of my work plan, I have a first 4 weeks where I take control. We call it day one activities, where I take control and where I very quickly conduct a situation assessment. So it was over the 4 to 6 weeks, having completed that, I realized that no, there wasn't much in the kitty. But of course, Bank of Ghana had also anticipated that. So on my appointment, where the microfinance institutions were concerned, Bank of Ghana made provision, okay, funds to settle some sections of to settle the depositors of the microfinance institutions. And the same applies to the savings and loans company. So Bank of Ghana, even before appointing me, had anticipated that there wouldn't be much there.
You cannot realize everything.
Yes, or there wouldn't even be much there. That is how come
Even trying to sell the assets to pay depositors.
Well, to the extent that they were there. But if Bank of Ghana, in a sense of good judgment, had appointed me, and at the same time had made provision, in the case of the microfinance institutions, had made provision of funding for me to very quickly pay off, settle depositors, then the implication was that there wasn't much over there in the first place.
I see. So these monies were deployed to you, the
Yeah.
5 billion thing were given to you
Yeah.
for the Ministry of Finance or wherever.
That's right.
And then we got the communication that Monday, all other things being equal,
Yeah.
payment was done.
That's right.
As at Monday, people were saying that we've not gotten anything.
But
What happened? What were you doing? Why were you delaying the process?
George, on Monday, we delivered.
At what time?
We delivered.
At the close of work, 5 p.m.,
No,
where you had paid everyone?
We delivered all beats, some delay, as a result of administrative lapses.
But as at
or
5 p.m., you had not made or sent any text message to anyone out there?
No, as at 5 p.m., we hadn't, because as at 5 p.m., we were engaged in some reconciliation exercises. We hadn't at that time. But we made sure that within Monday, some text messages went out. And indeed, on Monday, some accounts were credited at CBG.
But Mr. Impasam will see that there was a communication on Friday that payment to be made on Monday.
Yes.
So everybody was expecting that the receiver and then the banks would have done all that you have to do to ensure that by the close of 5 p.m. on Monday, my account was credited.
I take that. It is true. If you have to look at the cutoff of 5 p.m., we did not meet that deadline. But we started delivering from around 10 p.m. We did. All right. So we delivered on Monday.
I see. So help me out. Have you been able to pay these depositors? Because we are struggling to even identify even one person out of the 1,900 or even 2,000 messages that you have sent out.
Well, I tell you for a fact that we have paid, all right, between Monday, when we commenced payments, and yesterday, all right, we had paid a total of in excess of 10,000 claims, in excess of that 10,000 claims. We had paid in terms of value 610 million. We had paid. We paid schools. We credited accounts of schools. We credited accounts of hospitals. We credited accounts of some individuals. All right. So yes, we made those payments between Monday and Tuesday. All right. So we have made payments, but it doesn't surprise me because I know you would be surprised to know.
But don't you find that interesting that the receiver says, I've processed these claims, I've sent text messages to maybe close to 2,000 people, and we cannot even get one person out and say that Joy FM, Joy Business, I have been a beneficiary. I won't give you the details.
Yeah.
We are struggling.
Well, you may struggle because when people get money, they only want others to know that they have money, so you come with your worries and your problems on them.
Yeah.
Okay, but we received several thank yous. We received several
and
thank
the
yous.
receiver is prepared to share that with us.
I can share them with you.
Yeah.
We received several thank yous that, thank you, the message came. I followed up with CBG. I got my funds. We have them. All right. But then, that is a occupational hazard that I face. No thank you as such to testify that yes, you've indeed delivered. And that's what it is. And that is what actually belies the hard work that we are doing.
In the president's announcement, he talked about the fact that everyone is going to get his or her money. Now, how is this payment being done? We are hearing a bit about cash and bonds. I have my money there, about 100 million Ghana cedis. The president has said that, George, you're going to get everything. What is this bonds thing all about?
Well,
and why are you doing a mix of cash and bonds?
Let me explain, George, because I think this is a very important point. In the president's address, the president did say that all depositors will be fully paid. Okay, there are monies that have been locked up. All right. Of course, this applies, and I must emphasize, okay, to depositors whose claims have been validated and agreed in the receivership process, and of course in the liquidation process. So it isn't any claim at all that would be admitted and paid, because I did mention that there are some frivolous claims. All right, so this applies to claims that have been validated. The president also did mention a sum of 5 billion cedis.
Yeah.
And that is the worth or the value of outstanding claims in the region of 5 billion cedis. Government has provided funding to me. And what I have indeed is a 5 billion, which is consistent with the instructions and assurance of the president that there was going to be 5 billion cedis. I must also mention that it is consistent with the release of Bank of Ghana when I was appointed, and reiterated in my first press release. The key thing we did mention was to shore up confidence in the financial system, depositor funds were going to be protected. All right. So translated, that is the 5 billion remaining that is coming through. And it has come through by way of cash and bond. Okay, the cash component amounts to about 1 billion cedis, and there's 4 billion by way of bonds or commercial paper. Because I realized that when I use the term bond, some people came back to me and said they didn't understand what were the implications, and also keeping it simple.
Now keeping it simple, just so it's 5 billion, right?
Yeah.
It's a mix of bond and cash.
That's right.
Can you give us the cash component of
The
it?
cash component is 1 billion cedis, out of which I have distributed within 2 days 610 million cedis.
You're left with 400 million.
I'm left with 400 million.
Can it meet the needs of your registered depositors?
Well, I mean, as far as the cash element is concerned, it will go a long way. It will go a long way in terms of the fact that if I make the necessary distributions of the 1 billion, all right, I'll be left with about 8,000 claims outstanding, all right, and we are coming from a position I did mention 360,000 in number of claims, but if I'm able to disburse the 1 billion cedis, I will be left with 8,000 cedis, 8,000 in number of claims. So it's quite considerable.
But some would say that for a lot of these people out there who have been waiting for this cash, it's about liquidity. They want their cash.
Yes, they want their cash, George. But you should appreciate the context. This is an insolvency situation we are talking about. All right. A company is insolvent because it is not able to fully meet all its obligations. And therefore, in an insolvency situation, it is difficult to expect all your cash. But we have a situation where government has gone out of its way to undertake to pay everybody's deposit. Nobody's going to lose. That is those deposits that have been validated and agreed. What is better than that?
In your notes to Bank of Ghana, did you ask for more cash, or you wanted a mix of bond and cash?
Well, I asked for 5 billion cedis. That was based on an analysis
Cash.
of what was outstanding. I used funding of 5 billion. But of course, it isn't my call to determine how it should come. It has come in a combination of cash and bonds, 1 billion cedis in cash, which is quite considerable in terms of impacts. As far as 100% cash payment is concerned, it is considerable. I have a 4 billion in terms of commercial paper, and that captures the exposure of the about 8,000 claims that I have. And I think it's quite considerable.
Mr. Nipa, help me out. So with this 1 billion cash and 4 billion commercial papers, how are you distributing it among these depositors?
Well,
are you capping any?
Well, with the payment of the 5 billion, it is outstanding amount. What is due you outstanding, and you're going to get everything ultimately for the 5 billion. Okay. And that is it. 5 billion is a whole amount, total amount. Everybody's going to get everything.
So like Adjoa Mensah has about 5 million Ghana cedis there. You've paid him just about 20,000 already. In your next round of payment for this, are you having any cap on the payment? Maybe I'll give you 30,000 cash. The rest will be in bonds.
Well, what I'll do with Madam Adjoa scenario will be given the cash that I have and the competing interests. All right. Adjoa Mensah is an individual. All right, and she's already received 20,000 cedis. All right. I am going to provide an additional 50,000 cedis. So Adjoa Mensah would have 70,000 cedis overall, and then the rest would be in bonds. If Adjoa Mensah has about what you mentioned, how much this year?
5 million.
5 million. Certainly, Adjoa Mensah is a very high network individual. All right, and that is what it is. All right. One reason why the government support is coming in, I must mention, is to cushion the very vulnerable, depositors who are exposed, very vulnerable, the small depositors. Certainly, within our context, at 70,000 cedis, and there's evidence to that effect. The small depositor has been fully taken care of.
So do I get from you that all the small depositors who have their money below 50,000 are going to get everything?
Everything in cash. Everything in cash. And 320,000 of them have already gotten everything.
That represents in percentage terms, in terms of...
Well, in percentage terms, we should be looking at the next about, 90% or something.
Payments have been done.
Yes, it's quite considerable.
But so,
at 320,000.
But if I get from you, there wouldn't be any cap payment. Are you looking at 30,000, 50,000 as a cap payment?
Well, I wouldn't say, it depends upon where you fall. All right, it depends upon where you fall. So an individual, for instance, will have an additional 50,000 cedis.
So that can be seen as a cap
per individual.
That could be seen as a cap.
You would have a 50,000 cedis.
That could be seen as a cap.
Well, you have a 50,000 cedis.
I'm just asking. So let's just say for the middle to lower income, individual depositor, that a cap of 50,000, or then high net worth depositors are looking at a cap of 50,000.
Well, if you have up to overall 70,000, you would have 100% or 70,000 in cash. If you have up to 70,000 cedis, and 70,000 savings is quite an amount, at least by my reckoning. Okay, if you are a hospital, if you are a school, these crucial social service roles that they play, you're going to get everything.
We'll be getting more details on this. In my economics class, I remember the scale of preference. Are we giving more preference to institutions than the retail clients and all those things? I'll be getting more details after there's a commercial break. This is the business edition of PM Express, and we are tracking the process of this whole receivership for these microcredits, microfinance, and savings and loans.